back to our channel. Looking for a few good reads? Check out what our team has found in a recent Forbes article. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. You know we love digging into fascinating topics, and today we're going to be diving into 6 different books, all by incredible female leaders.
It's going to be like a cheat sheet for wisdom, so you can actually use it in your life.
Exactly. And all this comes from a really cool Forbes article we found, and by the end, you'll be familiar with all these books, but we'll also try to give you some really practical takeaways so you can apply it to your own leadership journey.
Because effective leadership isn't about gender, it's about finding and using those universal strengths.
That's a great point. Now, the article kind of starts off by reminding us that confidence is like leadership 101, right? But it feels like for women, there are just more hurdles to jump over.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about how people see you either. There was this 2022 survey by the Female Quotient that found that 66% of women were still handling most of the household and childcare duties, even while they were saying they felt really resilient.
Wow. So these books aren't just about the boardroom. They're about handling life, period.
They're about handling all the things and still being able to lead effectively.
So true. Okay, so the first book that really stood out to me was Arwa Madawi's Strong Female Lead. She asks this question like, is lean in kind of outdated now? That whole idea of women just like adapting to the power structure as it exists?
Yeah, like just trying to fit into it.
Right. So Madawi really digs into this, and she looks at the early 21st century, which was just bonkers, right? Financial crises, pandemics, you name it. And based on interviews with some amazing women like Madeleine Albright, she argues that we need a totally new playbook when it comes to leadership. So instead of just fitting in, it's about changing the system itself.
You got it. Madawi even quotes Albright, who said, "It took me quite a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I am not going to be silent."
I love that.
Right, that's the energy shift Madawi's talking about.
It's so powerful. I know that I've felt that pressure to conform to certain leadership styles, even when they didn't feel authentic. Have you ever run into that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of us have. Like, we have to shrink ourselves to fit in a way. And that's exactly why books like these are so important. They give you a different way of seeing things, one that says, hey, you can be yourself and still be a great leader.
So true. Okay, moving on to book number 2, Calm Within the Storm, by Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe. Resilience is a big buzzword these days, but this book is all about what she calls everyday resilience.
It's that quiet strength we all need, not just for the huge crises, but for, like, the daily grind,
Yeah.
Dr. Hanley Defoe makes this really interesting point that a lot of times fear and stigma and stress are actually the things that prevent us from feeling capable.
That's so interesting. I love that she challenges that always be fighting mentality.
Me too. Instead of always pushing and striving, she suggests focusing on what she calls restorative pauses, little breaks during the day where you just reconnect with yourself.
And build that inner calm.
Exactly. It's about understanding that resilience doesn't mean being tough 24/7. It's knowing when to recharge.
It's about building that reserve of strength instead of running on fumes all the time.
Yes. And you know what? Those little moments of rest actually help us be more effective in the long run.
I can definitely see that. All right, time for Brené Brown. Dare to Lead, a classic, am I right?
Definitely a classic. And what's really interesting is that even if you've heard her talk about vulnerability before, this book really zeroes in on how it plays out in leadership.
Yeah, it's not just about like sharing your feelings all the time. It's about building a whole culture where vulnerability is seen as a strength.
And she has this amazing quote, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome."
So it's about admitting when you don't have all the answers and being open to learning from others.
Exactly. Leading with authenticity, not pretending to be perfect.
It makes me think about times when I felt like I had to have it all figured out and put on that perfect leader front. Looking back, how do you think my leadership style might have been different if I'd embraced vulnerability more?
That's a great question. I think a lot of times we think leadership has to be about giving orders, but maybe it's more about creating the right conditions for everyone to succeed, ourselves included.
Oh, I love that. Fostering growth, not just giving directions.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered 3 amazing books already, but we still have 3 more to go, and you definitely don't want to miss these.
They're packed with even more insights, so stick with us.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
In a quiet forest, a philosopher observed a spider weaving its web. "Why do you spin such delicate silk?" he asked. The spider replied, "Each thread is unique, yet together they form strength." The philosopher pondered, "Is life like your web, fragile yet resilient?" The spider nodded. "Every choice is a thread weaving our destiny." The philosopher realized that life's beauty lies in its complexity, where every decision shapes our path. "Thank you, wise spinner," he said, enlightened. As he walked away, he whispered, "Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us."
Okay, are you ready for 3 more books full of leadership goals?
Ooh, I'm ready. What do we got?
All right, so next up is Character-Driven Leadership for Women by Kathy Archer.
Oh, this one really spoke to me. I mean, it's all about self-reflection as the basis of good leadership.
Yeah, exactly. It's like figuring out your own values and ethics and then making sure that as a leader, your actions line up with those.
So it's not just about, like, knowing what your values are. It's about actually living them out.
Yeah, walking the walk, right. And Archer talks about how that kind of authenticity really builds trust with your team. It impacts your whole reputation.
She also has this concept she calls the infinite leadership loop.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
What is that exactly?
It's this 5-step process, right? So it starts with reflecting on your values and then kind of observing how you're actually behaving, then getting feedback from other people, experimenting with new approaches, and then circling back to reflection again.
So it's like a constant cycle of growth.
Exactly. It's ongoing. It's not just a one-time thing. And that's how you make sure your leadership style is always evolving and getting closer to what you want it to be.
Love it. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Dr. Amy Clymer's Deliberate Creative Teams is all about, well, teams.
Yeah, teams. But specifically how to build teams that are really good at innovating.
Interesting.
And I think this book is so cool because it really pushes back on this idea that innovation is just like some random magical thing, like a lightning strike.
Like you just have to wait for inspiration to strike you.
Exactly. Dr. Clymer says innovation is a system, not an accident. And I love that.
So she's saying we can create the conditions for innovation.
Yes. And she gives you all these practical ways to build a team culture that encourages creativity and collaboration and, being okay with taking risks.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what stood out to you in this book?
One thing was her emphasis on psychological safety. Have you heard of that term before?
I feel like I have, but remind me.
Yeah, so it's basically the feeling that you can speak up in a group, share your ideas, even if they're a little out there, and make mistakes without being judged or punished for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I get it.
And Dr. Clymer's argument is that that feeling of safety is absolutely essential if you want a team to be truly innovative.
That makes a lot of sense. If everyone's afraid to share their ideas, you're going to miss out on so much potential.
Totally. Have you ever felt like you couldn't speak up on a team? Or like you were holding back?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it definitely makes you less creative, less willing to contribute. Like, why bother?
Right. It's a good reminder that as leaders, we have to work on creating that open, trusting environment. And Dr. Clymer actually gives us specific steps we can take.
That's awesome. All right, we've got one more book to talk about, and this one's a little different. It's Sarah Cooper's How to Be Successful Without Hurting Men's Feelings.
Yeah, this one's a little more on the satirical side, but she uses humor to talk about those double standards that women so often face in leadership roles.
It is funny.
Yeah.
Like, I actually laughed out loud a few times.
Yeah.
But it's also making some really important points.
Yeah, Cooper comes up with these hilarious situations and in action items, but they're all pointing out these subtle biases that can hold women back. For example, there's a whole section called How to Ace Your Performance Review Without Looking Too Aggressive.
Oh, wow.
It's so funny, but it's also like so true. The expectations are just different.
It reminds me of this one time I was in a meeting and I was presenting this new idea and it was like crickets. Nobody said anything, right? And then one of the guys on the team basically said the exact same thing, just rephrased it a little. And suddenly everyone was like, oh, yeah, great idea.
Oh, classic.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah, Cooper really captures those kinds of experiences perfectly. And even though she's using humor, I think it's a wake-up call for all of us to be more aware of those unconscious biases.
Yeah, to really think about how even subtle biases can have a huge impact and that we need to be actively trying to counter them.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting, right? Like all these books, even though they're so different, they all kind of come back to this idea of authenticity.
Like figuring out who you are as a leader and then going from there.
Yeah. And not being afraid to be yourself. And I think that's what's so cool about this Forbes article. It really highlights how each of these authors has had their own struggles their own challenges, but they've come through it and they're stronger for it.
It makes it so much more relatable, you know? They're not just talking at you, they're sharing their own experiences and giving real advice that they've actually lived.
Right? It's like they're saying, hey, leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about learning and growing and being able to bounce back when things get tough.
Exactly. And those are skills anyone can benefit from.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's bring this back to our listeners. We've looked at 6 books, tons of wisdom from these amazing women leaders.
We talked about resilience, vulnerability, leading with character, building creative teams, and how to deal with those double standards.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We did. And I think the big takeaway here is that leadership is a journey. It's not like you just arrive at some destination and you're done.
There's no finish line.
Right. It's about always working on your skills, understanding yourself better, and finding that unique voice that makes you you.
And those are things everyone can work on no matter where they are in their leadership journey.
Totally. Whether you're leading a whole team or a project or even just leading yourself, these insights can help you handle challenges and build stronger relationships and just make a positive impact.
It makes me wonder, though. The article is focused on women in leadership, but it got me thinking. How can men be better allies? What can they learn from all of this?
That's a really good question. And I think the first step is realizing that supporting women in leadership isn't just about being nice. It's actually about making the world a more fair and just place, you know?
It benefits everyone.
Exactly. Men can learn a lot from these books about how to create environments that are more inclusive and supportive for women.
So what does that look like practically?
Well, it's about things like checking your own biases, speaking up when you see sexism happening, and advocating for policies that actually promote gender equality, not just in the workplace, but everywhere.
It's about looking at our own behavior in all parts of life.
Absolutely. Thinking about how we interact with women, how we talk about women, and how we can support the women in our lives, both personally and professionally.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we really encourage you to check out some of these books and see what speaks to you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with courage and be your authentic self.